Welcome to the For the Love of the Game podcast with the newly minted, engaged Brian Hernandez and yours truly, Jefferson Belfort. How you feeling, Brian?
Man, I am feeling so good. It's I mean, so yeah, for the listeners, the reason why we missed last week's episode, we're really not gonna miss episodes unless it's something that's extremely special, and we just made an executive decision. Let's postpone the episode because I recently got engaged, and it was like going into it. I know she's gonna say yes, but still, you want to make it nice. You want to make it special. You want to surprise her and all that stuff. So it was a lot of fun. It was really good, but we were just talking about before, Jeff. It's felt like it's been so long since we've done a podcast and since we talked basketball. So I am so excited for today.
I am as well. Like my man Brian did, there's an NBA team trying to put a ring on the finger right now, right? So let's get right into it. Some of the topics that we're going to go over today is about the Scottie Pippen saga that's going on. Lou Will talking about six man, the best six man ever. And Jokic, does he deserve a little bit of love? That's some of those topics that we're going to get into today. And you know what? Let's get right into it, Brian.
Let's do it.
All right. So leading off, like I was mentioning, if you don't know about this yet, you're under a rock. So recently, I think it was about a week ago, where Scottie Pippen released on GQ Sports. He had a segment talking about an excerpt from his upcoming book called Unguarded. And he mentioned The Last Dance. And since that time, Scottie is now going on a book tour, essentially, and trying to let people know it ain't all that, man. But one of the direct quotes that he said was about The Last Dance was that Michael Jordan, he couldn't have been more condescending if he tried with how he portrayed his teammates in The Last Dance. And since then, Scottie has been gravitating to more and more ridiculous claims. And it's verging on the moment where someone's going to step in and say something that was on the team. We don't know. Or, they're just gonna let Scottie just talk his stuff,
Yeah, this whole thing, it's so messy. Since The Last Dance came out, we've seen Scottie just been going off. He's not been happy with this. He's been very vocal about he didn't like the portrayal of his saga and how this, and in the GQ article that you mentioned too, he's talking about like how Michael Jordan is portrayed to be, or he's a center figure here, and what he thought they're going to be talking about the Chicago Bulls, but no, it's like we're talking about Michael Jordan and then the Chicago Bulls, and that's what he has a huge issue with. And I mean, at the end of the day, this is his documentary, and I understand like Scottie Pippen's always been number two. He's the ugly stepchild in a sense, but like he's I don't know. Like I thought in watching Last Dance, I thought he got a pretty fair portrayal, and at least like him being the number two guy and being as good potentially as Michael Jordan, I thought they kind of portrayed that in the documentary. What do you think?
I agree. I think everyone got just due that actually, was an impactful part of those six rings. Everyone was given a chance to speak. I'm sure that they would not have released it if they didn't, right? You saw Paxson on there. You saw Pippen had his own dedicated episode, which makes this such a wild claim first from him. And then second, you know, it's been told that Horace Grant obviously does not have a working relationship with Michael, but even him, he had more grace with this situation than what Scottie is doing right now. Granted, Scottie is entitled to have the feelings that he has. I mentioned on Twitter, I posted something saying along the lines that he is entitled to those feelings. But the thing is, this is the perfect example to show that you could do everything in your power to uplift a team. And still there's people that will not be happy with how it went because it just didn't go their way.
Yeah, it's tough. What you were talking about before, so I actually have the quote from the GQ article, and Scottie Pippen says, like, even in the second episode, which focused for a while on my difficult upbringing and unlikely path to the NBA, the narrative returned to MJ and his determination to win. I was nothing more than a prop, his best teammate of all time, he called me. He couldn't have been more condescending if he tried. Like, I get why he's upset. Because, I mean, if you think about it, look where the direction of Michael Jordan is right now. He has all the shoes, he has the brands, he's the biggest name. And Scottie, he's doing his book tour, and it's he doesn't have the same amount of fame as MJ does, and he feels like he put that same amount of work as he did, and he contributed as much as Michael. So, like you said, like he has the right to feel the way he does. But he's like, I don't know about going like public with all this and talking trash and all this stuff. Like, that's where I think it kind of draws the line.
And you know what is just more telling about all of this is that notice how MJ has not, gone to the media to air out his grievances about it. There's reports that MJ reached out to him after it, and he even was saying that the reports were saying that Scottie did not reach back out. Like, he did not, after MJ wanted to air it out between the both of them. And this is the first time it's been said that they've had falling outs. But just going off of like some of the things that I've been watching sports pundits say, Stephen A. Smith said it clearly. I think this is the end between the both of them. For him to take this stark stance on this, it just, he put the last nail in the coffin between their relationship. And it's sad to hear that, because there's probably no greater model of what excellence looked like than that team. And for him to feel that it's more of a condescending way that MJ is referring to him. Granted, MJ is a very cocky guy, but for him to delegate like praise to someone means that he actually felt that,
Yeah.
And I want to bring up a part of the documentary. I'm sure everyone's probably encountered a clip, a meme, or even just watched the whole thing. There was a point in it where they discuss MJ discussing how hard he was on his teammates. And MJ said, you know what? That's the way how I do it. If you didn't like how I did it, like all those rings, all the things that we did, he got visibly emotional after that, and to see that like Scottie still can't see that or can't view that MJ was really trying to push them to another level or to new heights, is something that's just beyond me, first. And then second, think about how many times MJ had to bail out the team, not just Scottie, but the team, because of things that, was happening against some very difficult contenders that they're going up against.
Yeah, I found it very interesting. Like you're talking about of like Scotty doesn't feel like he got a fair portrayal, and like MJ during the entire documentary is talking like Scotty was my right hand man. He was right there with me. He pushed me to be greater, and like he's giving him the highest praise that he can. And then I guess the only parts that actually like show Scotty in a negative light is when I mean just they're showing the historical kind of facts of it and like the videos of behind the scenes of when he refused to come back into the game, when he didn't get the amount of money he wanted, and he was like saying he's going to get surgery in the off season and all this stuff. Like that's the only kind of negative stuff, but I mean there's it kind of seemed like there really wasn't much of a interpretation because they kind of did both sides fair. Like everyone's like, we understand why Scotty's doing these things. Here is why he's doing them, but here's a video of him doing it and him actually talking about it. Something else that Scotty said was, to quote, to make things worse, Michael received $10 million for his role in the documentary, while my teammates and I didn't earn a dime. Another reminder of the pecking order from the old days. And yeah, like his problem is Michael is getting paid all this money while these other guys are just there. Meanwhile, they have all the cameras on them. They're in the locker room and they're filming all this stuff, their practices. Meanwhile, they're not getting compensated for it.
Hey, it's the nature of the beast. I think the same thing would happen if LeBron decided to do a documentary on his life. There is a documentary on LeBron in his life, in his early years, and you don't hear the guys that he grew up with that was on that St. Mary team complaining about, hey, well, I didn't get my dues out of this film. I wasn't portrayed right. And then just going back on, you brought up him refusing to come back into the game. That was the 94 playoffs, right? Mm-hmm. And for him, even before he released what he released right now, the statements that he released now, for him, like about 6 months ago, to go and say that it was racist, that Phil Jackson didn't want him to get the last shot, that's out of bounds. Yeah. Once again, another thing, you could just file that grievance between you and Phil and have that conversation and hash that out between you, then bring this to the light. And then not only that, he started to complain about that as well. He said that, why are you putting in 94 in this documentary when MJ's not even around, right? But to show the whole picture of what went on, I think it was the right thing to do to show that. But not only that, to show 95, because 95 is a year not a lot of people talk about 95, that MJ actually came back at the last few games of the season. And then, they propelled themselves all the way to the Eastern Conference Finals. And granted, they lost to a young Shaq and everything, but that is a loss on MJ's side. And MJ went into that when that documentary was being done. So for a good chunk of my life, I didn't even think that the MJ was in that 95 team.
Yeah.
So for him to go into that, show that side of it, and then show that because of that pain that happened in 95, not being able to go back to the finals in that sense, or in that situation, we could have been talking about 7 championships first. But second, it led to what was next, that next three-peat, because they had to play that Magic team again. And then they took everything, that pain from the last year, and brought it into 96.
Yeah, I think, when looking at all the stuff that Scotty's saying, what it seems like to me is potentially a cash grab of trying to promote his book. Because, like, just look at the timing of when he's saying all this stuff. Look at I mean, he's releasing his book and his side of the story and all this stuff that I mean, it's actually it's working for me. Of now, I kind of want to hear his side and what he has in his book, where he released in the book, to get his point of view. And I mean, that's what all this is about. I mean, Scottie doesn't have the type of like I was mentioning before, he doesn't have the the shoe deals or the endorsements that Michael did, but this is his way of trying to cash in the money. Start some drama
Exactly.
because drama sells.
And I gotta, I don't think we're even being nearly as harsh as we should be on Scottie about this. So, like, if we're gonna go into the stats, right, of it all, right? That's the last 5 or 6 seasons that he played kind of skews his stats. But the guy was averaging 16 points, 6 rebounds, 5 assists. Come on, like I don't think we're so off saying that. Hey, like those are middling numbers. That's not really, crazy numbers that pop out and say, you know what, this guy is amazing, and not only just that, guys on the top 50 players in the league. What more does this guy want? Like,
Yep.
it really is funny to think of it like that, or to see that he's complaining about stuff like this.
Yeah, like if you look at it, like number 2 type of players generally don't get the same exact love as Scottie Pippen. Everyone knows how great Scottie Pippen was. Like you just mentioned, he was in the top 50 NBA players of all time. Look at a player as we see right now we have going on of Steph Curry and Klay Thompson. Klay Thompson doesn't get the love that Steph Curry does, but I mean, he's kind of close to him as in terms of just being a shooter, and he's as impactful as Steph was during those championship runs. And then you have like Tony Parker. Tony Parker, everyone forgets Tony Parker was so good. Yet, he wasn't on the list of the top 100 players, and he doesn't really get as much love as Scottie Pippen does. So I think Scottie gets enough, but he just he cries for more, which doesn't really make sense because he gets as much as he deserves.
Exactly. And then this is where I'm going to land on the last thing on this is, a good way to just reassess this as well is what did Scottie went to try to do after MJ left? Scottie went ring chasing. And I think that was intentional. That was very intentional for him to have that one thing over MJ. He goes to Houston for that 1 year, pairs up with Olajuwon and Barkley, and it just doesn't work, right? He goes to Portland. Those Portland years was pretty good for him, actually, but still could not get it done. It's just showing, like, Scottie, like, has a little bit, I wouldn't say humility, because he did show that in his career, but don't try to flip the narrative at this point, because we know what you were. You were a great player. There was moments where you looked like you could have been the best player in the league, but MJ is to another stratosphere where, of course, he's getting the praise, and you're seeing him get the praise, and shouldn't be that upset about him getting that praise.
Yeah, I think that's the perfect way to put it. Nothing else I want to add. I say let's move on to our next topic. You brought it up, so to me, so I would love you to explain it.
Yeah, so recently Taylor Rooks, I believe she's from Athletic. I don't know if she's on the Athletic.
Sounds right.
She's on Bleacher. Okay. Actually. She had a sit down with Lou Williams, and there's a lot of things I was discussing there, the potential of retirement, but biggest thing that stuck out in that conversation that she was having with Lil Will was she asked him, guarding being arguably the greatest sixth man of all time. And Lou Will went on to proceed to say, yeah, I believe I am that person. It's because of how I embodied it. He wants for kids to remember that you could take the worst of a situation and get the best out of it. And you know what? Honestly, I agree with that. But I think there's a conversation to be had of greatest six man ever. And one name that came to mind right away for me was Manu Ginobili. And due to that, I wanted to see first, Brian, what do you think about that? About Lou Will saying he's the greatest? And then do you think there's other individuals that you would add into this conversation?
Ooh, so I'd say when you first brought this up to me, as soon as you told me Lou Will was saying he was the greatest sixth man of all time, I immediately thought, no shot, Manu's the guy. Manu, like, do we forget what he's done? Do we forget the 4 championships he has with San Antonio? Do we forget how great Manu was and how impactful he was to that team? But then I started to actually look at the numbers a little bit closer. And it kind of surprised me of how similar these guys actually are. Their numbers throughout their career are actually pretty so Manu 13 points, 3.5 rebounds and 4 assists, and Lou Will 14 points, 2.2 rebounds, 3.4 assists. These guys, it's pretty similar, and this is all too, which is pretty funny. At the time of this recording, they played the same amount of games at 1,075. They both played.
That's crazy.
They both played 1,075 games at the time of me looking at these numbers, and it's like they're so similar. The only thing going back to it, looking at the awards, kind of surprised me. I didn't know Manu actually only has 1 Sixth Man of the Year award compared to Lou Will, who has 3. And looking at individual years that they've had, surprisingly, Lou Will actually has some better statistical years than Manu Ginobili. The years that he specifically played with the Clippers, this man was 1 year like scoring 22 points off the bench. And I think the most I saw that Manu scored was 19 or so. And I mean, the numbers are actually very comparable. There's a conversation to be had. I'd say you asked me on some other guys that might be that might also join this conversation. I actually off the top of my head, these are the main 2 guys I could really think of. Like I don't really have much else. What about you?
Yeah, I think there's a conversation to be had to throw Jamal Crawford in there just because he's won the same amount as Lou Will, but I do think that they're on different elks, right?
Yeah.
But what I would say is the reason why I kind of am leaning towards Ginobili is first, I would say when Ginobili won his, it was during a time in the league where I don't think they were considering giving that award in that fashion, like consecutively. And you know, I wouldn't say it watered down the award, but it definitely changed they've changed the perspective of the award because I bring up 2020 where you have him and Lou Will. I'm speaking of Lou Will and Montrezl Harrell are on the same ballot. I don't think that's right to have 2 guys on the same team vying for Sixth Man of the Year because then it just defeats the purpose of the award in my mind, right? So where I think that the advantage comes from is you start looking at, I think of Sixth Man, I'm thinking of this guy is impactful, right? So yes, Lou Will is impactful coming off the bench. But beyond that, when I'm now thinking of all time, I'm thinking body of work, I'm thinking of longevity, I'm thinking of also what did you put in that is going to cement your legacy. When we look at playoff stats, those are definitely more skewed than you'd see for Lou Will. So when you look at Lou Will's playoff experience, he's averaging around 11 points, 3 assists, 2 rebounds on around 90 games, right? Then you have Manu, who's averaging 14 points on 4 rebounds and 4 assists in 218 games. But the way where I think Manu, in my mind, takes the cake and runs with it is if you take a look back into the 05 NBA Finals, because Manu was relegated to being a 6th man right from the jump. This is, I believe, the year after the summer where he led Argentina to a gold medal against the U.S. team. He comes into that season very hot and plays against they play against the reigning champions of that year, the Detroit Pistons, who were defensively sound. Manu in that finals was averaging, and this is almost starter-like numbers, is he's averaging 19 points, 6 rebounds, 4 assists. He's shooting close to 50% from the field, and he's shooting 38%, close to 39% from the 3-point in that finals. It's stuff like that. That's why I'm saying all time, I'm putting Manu over him, because impact goes beyond what I just did in the regular season. It goes into the body of work that I carried into playoffs, and they needed me. My issue, and now going back to Lou Will, is I've seen countless playoffs where Williams just slicks to the back. You don't talk about him in the playoffs. You don't see him anymore. And it's honestly the reason why he's not on the Clippers anymore. Is first, he's a defensive liability, which Manu isn't. He also disappears in playoffs. And that's why I give the edge to Manu in my mind because of that.
Yeah, it's the body of work is definitely just more sound for Manu. I mean, just look at what he's done for the Spurs. Like he's, even though he's the 6th man, and people like to think like, oh, if you're not a starter, you're not as important to the team. But Manu is one of the most important players on that team. Manu is so special, and it is like you mentioned, the defense. We're not going to see those turn up on like these stats that we're talking about. The impact isn't always just as clear as the box score. So there's a reason why Manu had made 2 different All-Star teams. There's a reason why he's made 2 different All-NBA teams, being the 3rd team. There's a reason why he's has all these awards versus Lou Will just has 3 6th Man of the Year awards. Lou Will is a extremely important and a spark plug coming off the bench, but it's just it is actually pretty close, I'd say, between the two. But I have to agree with you that Manu definitely takes the cake in this conversation.
And like I said, shout out to Jamal Crawford. You know, we still love you, but I think it's a 2-man race at this point.
Yeah, I think so. I'd be interested to see how many games has Jamal Crawford actually started, because I looked at the 2 between Lou Will and Manu, and Manu started, out of the 1,057 games that they've both played, Manu started 349 and Lou Will 122. It's surprising that these guys, like, throughout their entire career, were actually straight 6 men. Like, that's crazy.
I got Jamal's. He has played in 1,327 games, wow, and he started in 433.
Okay, so definitely a little more than these other guys. I mean, not too much more, but it's crazy to see like how similar, like these guys are six men, and yet they've all kind of played around the same number of games. Like they're all around the same time, and uh, but like you said, 2-man race though, 2-man race. Now, do you want to move on to our next topic?
Yes, I do. I'm ready for it.
So you also brought this one up to me. Do you wanna intro it with Jokic?
Yeah, so late in the fourth quarter, about like a little less than 3 minutes left in the game against the Miami Heat versus the Nuggets. We saw an very aggressive, almost very close to being unnecessary foul on Jokic by Marcus Morris. I believe it's Marcus Morris. Markieff Morris.
Yes.
Yeah. And the events that resulted after that is that Jokic decided to retaliate. First, I'm going to say, I think that Jokic is completely warranted in what he did. Will he face the consequences for it? Yes. He's a grown man. He understands that. He knows that there was going to be some consequence that came from it. But I think it was necessary that Jokic didn't allow for him to get punked like that on the court. And now it beckons the question, and the thing that me and Brian are going to dissect right now is Jokic getting the respect that he deserves as first a reigning MVP, and even last year as an MVP candidate?
It's well, one, I agree with you of his retaliation is 100% deserved. I mean, like the guy Markieff Morris, definitely way too much contact. Yeah, that was on purpose. He was trying to do a hard foul, and it ended up being way too hard. There's a difference between doing a hard foul versus actually like shoving this guy. And I don't know. As we saw, he's gonna accept the consequences, but at that moment, he has to do something about it. So boom, cool, he does that. But in terms of him getting respect, definitely not. And it's I think there's a couple things that come into it. One, he's in Denver. No one really talks about Denver. This team is one of the best teams in the NBA right now, and yet regardless, it's kind of similar situation to Utah, that they're just not really going to get loved because they're a smaller market and they're not going to talk about him as much. Two, I still think there's kind of some bias to him being a European player. So we see this with players that, he's not as flashy as everybody else. This man, his jumping power is not really there. This man can't really jump over an envelope, and he's not gonna stand out. But if you actually watch his game, he's one of the smartest players without being able to have that athletic ability that most of the other players in the NBA has. And there's just some type of, I feel like, stigma against these type of players. But as you just mentioned, he was a reigning MVP, or he is the reigning MVP. He was an MVP candidate continuously throughout his career. And like, this man is so insanely good. But it's I think also the stigma of him being a second round pick kind of is there. Like if he was a number 1 pick, like, or a top even 5 pick, similar to like Luka, we might actually see more love for him. But him being a second round pick, I think there's still a little like jabs at him. He doesn't get that respect he deserves.
Yeah, no, we just finished talking about Manu Ginobili, and I think that would have been a perfect segue, or something to branch into about that 6-man conversation. Is that there's still, like you said, that stigma that foreign players just aren't to the ilk of these American-born players. And that's definitely something that you're keeping in mind with Manu's conversation, with the Manu conversation. But that's something that you're also keeping in mind with Jokic. Jokic is, and it's honestly disrespectful for, we look back at last year, he was clearly dominant in everything that he was doing last year. And yet you still had conversations with subpar Warriors, and Steph Curry is just lighting up courts, right? But they were a subpar team last year. And still, all of the brass, of the NBA, like the top NBA players, the brass of the top NBA players were all still saying, "Oh, you got to give it to Steph. Steph deserves this." But no one was really advocating for Jokic getting that. And I wanted to tie that into what I think a few years back, or either it was last year, is that one sports pundit, Stephen A. Smith, brought up how he doesn't want to see Giannis be the face of the league because he's an international player. And that's not, like, I don't think anyone cares about that actually sits and watches the game and sits there and thinks, like, God, like, not from Greece. Like, I can't see this guy being the best player in the league. I don't think there's anyone that's truly thinking that. But there is people that are in the know in the NBA that just have that idea percolating that, hey, we don't want to, I think it's more of like, they don't want to lose grasp of the thought process of NBA and America has the best talent pool because they're all coming from America. But there's going to be guys that come in from other countries that are going to be sound. Look at Luka. I think this is the best time for us to have these international players show what they bring to the table. And honestly, there's too much players that look the same and do the same thing. I love to see someone from another country come here and kind of change how the game is played.
Yeah, it's to piggyback off what you were just saying, too often, like you say, we see these guys and it's fun to watch all the crazy dunks and all that stuff, but it's also, there's something else when seeing, Luka, who also not very athletic, but yet somehow he's schooling every single player. And just, what was it, the other day, he's driving to the into the rim and he does a behind the pack, like, dribble move kind of thing, and just kind of like throws an alley-oop. And like Jokic, you just see him in the post do the craziest passes you ever seen. Like, these guys, although they're not as athletically gifted as some of the other guys, they found a way to still dominate these players just through their basketball IQ and just practice and all that. And it's incredible to see. And it's I'm surprised more people kind of aren't piggybacking off of that.
Yeah, no, actually, another thing I wanted to add is, we also talked about the Bulls, and there's another tie to that as well, is I was watching this documentary on Tony Kukoc early in the week, and he's like, what I would say one of the godfathers of the international game and making it more mainstream for them to come over, right? And he didn't get the due love. And I really do think that the love that Jokic doesn't get is strongly tied to that. Because if you had that same talent, if you had that same way of playing, they would have beat it out of you in AAU. They would have beat it out of you in collegiate basketball. There's so many players that we see, and big men now, that we see in this league that, can shoot. But when you saw them in the collegiate level, they never took 1-3. They never. Jaren Jackson is one of those individuals that I remember Seeing him when he was playing in college, that never took a three, but as soon as he came to the league, I was like, what the hell? This guy's taking a three and he makes it, you know?
Yeah.
So it's why I think it's refreshing to have these international players. And I think that Jokic needs some more respect. He needs some more love. Hopefully, just like Giannis at this point, and I have my feelings about Giannis just because of my team, but Giannis is getting his respect that he deserves now. I hope that Jokic could find a way to get a championship and get that due respect that he deserves as well.
Yeah, it's crazy to see of like we're talking about him not getting respect. And like he is not getting the respect that he deserves. But like we were just mentioning, this guy just won MVP. This guy, I mean, and it was like you mentioned, people were like, "Oh, maybe it's Steph. Maybe if it's Embiid. If Embiid if he wasn't hurt for most of the year or for a lot of the year, they probably would have gave it to Embiid over Jokic. It's just that he was just so dominant and like he forced their hand rather than like you were saying with Curry they were trying to find every single way to give the MVP to Steph Curry, even though his team is barely making the playoffs and what were they then playing? Like they were trying to give it to him every way possible, but Jokic was just so good, and I love seeing him. This guy is going to dominate the league for many years to come, and I'm excited to see it.
Agreed.
I had a little bit more that I actually wanted to go over because there's been some recent news that I think would be fun to touch on. So, our boy, we've talked about him multiple times on this podcast, Marvin Bagley, has been stuck in Sacramento screaming, "Let me out. Please, anyone help me." And recently, we got a report, and there's video of it too. Marvin Bagley is refusing to check into the game. This man does not want to play for the Kings anymore. This has been a giant mess, and it's just been handled every way possibly wrong. But no one's really talking about it. And Jeff, I want to get your thoughts. What do you think about this Marvin Bagley situation? And also, does Luke Walton deserve some blame here? And should he be fired? Is his job on the line?
Time for a new nickname. His name now is Marvin Pippen Jr. That's his new nickname because I guess he saw it. He was reading the tea leaves and hearing about this and thought, you know what, this would be the perfect time to pull this off, to look just like Scottie Pippen and refuse to get in the game. So that's just a joke of it. But being like more serious about this is, dude is frustrated with his situation. I've always had this feeling since Luke was on the Lakers. It's just he just doesn't seem for a past player. He just doesn't seem like the guy that's like in tune with his players. Like, and that's what I've gotten from him from the Laker years, and I'm still getting that now from the Kings years. And granted, I think did a great job his time when he was with the Warriors, and still to this point they're banking on that time that he had with the Warriors. A lot of people try to give him credit for that. I believe it was like 30 games they won in a row when Steve Kerr wasn't around. But everybody knew it at that point. That team knew what they were doing. They knew what to do to win. That they almost didn't need, like Kyrie said, they almost did not need a coach at that point, right? Yeah. So he's still banking off of that. And I don't know. I wouldn't say 100% yet it's time to fire him, but I think, It's starting to be it's starting to be the time to start just like whispering it out there and just going into the Reddits. Like if you're a Kings fan, like what do you think about moving away from Luke Walton? Because I really think that there's a lot of talent on that team and it shouldn't be. I think the last I checked, they were 5-7. I don't think they should be 5-7. I think they could be a lot better.
Yeah, I mean, looking at them, they have the talent. They've been drafting high every single year, and they should have some decent team by now. This is like the process, but the process gone wrong. They've done they've done so much, and finally, they actually have some decent pieces on the team. Harrison Barnes has been going off. They should be better, and I think it's unacceptable. Kings fans deserve more. They're super loyal, and I hope they can do better in the future.
If if that's the Sixers are called the process, it's got to be called something even worse. Like it got to be called I don't know, the processing. That's the processing, because all the fans are still processing what the hell is going on here. Because they, like you said, they've been drafting high for over a decade. Over a decade. And think about how many guys that they've they've put together, that they made a big swing for, just didn't pan out. You're talking about the Tariq Evans. You're talking about DeMarcus Cousins. You're talking about now De'Aaron Fox with that conversation. There's just so many names to throw out there that why is it not getting actualized into being a productive team? I think the last time they've been in the playoffs is longer than, and the Timberwolves broke their streak a couple of years back.
Yeah. Right?
So I don't know how long it's been, but I know it had to have been early 2000s the last time that the Kings was in the playoffs. And man, as a fan base, I would be there every day. Just, pitchforks outside and trying to figure out how are we going to get out of this. It's been 15 straight years. 15, let that sink in. 15 years of not being in the playoffs means 15 years of being in the lottery, which means there was 15 franchise potential players that they missed out on.
That's really bad. And like you said, you mentioned they've had some really good ones. And like DeMarcus Cousins was at one time one of the best big men in the league. Of course, injuries. I mean, they've had some bad luck as well. Like Tariq Evans won Rookie of the Year and all that, and like just injuries. They've had some bad luck. But finally, it seems like things could potentially be turning around with De'Aaron Fox, Halliburton, I'm blanking on their new rookie name, Davion Mitchell.
Davion.
Yep. He's looked amazing. And you got Rashawn Holmes. You just signed into a really reasonable contract. I'm excited for the Kings moving forward. Next, I kind of want to there's been a lot more guys that this has happened to, but this is one of the best teams in the NBA right now. And for the Bulls, Nikola Vucevic just recently tested positive for COVID. He's going to be out for at least 10 days. Jeff, how do you think this affects them?
I don't think it greatly affects them. I think they're just well-run team. I believe I'm going to get this. I think I'm going to get his name right, but Billy Donovan is their head coach. He's been, he's been coaching. He's been a hell of a coach in this beginning half of the season. I remember his first season with the Thunder. He did something similar. I believe that was the year that they went up 3-1, but they lost. But, the guy's a good coach, so I think they'll figure it out. I think a bigger miss is now the fact that they don't have Robert Williams. I said Robert Williams. Patrick Williams. I always mix up with them too. But Patrick Williams and him being missing, is going to expose their inside defensive presence. So they're going to have to figure that out. But like you said, there's a lot of teams that's dealing with that now. You're looking at the Sixers as well. That is dealing with that as well. And hopefully this gets righted. They right the ship. If they even could remain 500 in the time that he's not around, I'll be happy for them with that.
Yeah, exactly what you said. If they remain 500 in the time that he's gone, that's a huge win for them. Like that's amazing. The only concern like I have is one that you kind of touched on it, when or without Vucevic, they're extremely small. They don't have anyone else to play center. I think probably like their next. I guess they have Tony Bradley as their next guy. Like it definitely removes a lot of their just their power of like Vucevic was able to space the floor and do so much in the post. He's a great rebounder. They lose a lot there. I'm looking forward to see how they weather this storm, and yeah, it should be interesting for them. Another one, two that kind of tying together is Ben Simmons is open to joining the Celtics, and then as well, there's a report that said the Celtics are unwilling to trade Jaylen Brown for Ben Simmons. So Jeff, what do you think about the situation?
So that's hilarious.
Yeah.
Second, and I'm happy that you brought this up because I wanted to say that I think if this trade gets done, this is a great trade for the Celtics because it frees up the court a little bit. Celtics have an issue with identity, and the identity problem is coming from they have two players doing the exact same thing.
Yep.
This changes that a lot, right? But at the same time, to flip the coin, I don't think this is the best you could get for Jaylen Brown. I would always look into, if you are actually strongly considering trading Jaylen Brown, you go across the league and look at what's out there, not just the Sixers, because Ben Simmons is going through what he's going through and trying to get out of there. But I think you have to feel out calls if you're going to make it known that you are going to, which they've said no to, but like we've seen teams that flip and flop all the time and say one thing, but they're actually doing the other. If you're fielding calls, I'm fielding calls to other teams than just the Sixers. Sixers should just be on the back burner, that it's there. If push comes to shove, you can't get the right deal that you're looking for, you pull the trigger on that.
Yeah, I think you hit everything on the nail. His Jaylen Brown's value is definitely higher than just Ben Simmons. Ben Simmons' value is at an all-time low. Jaylen Brown's value is at an all-time high. Does the fit actually make sense for both teams? I think it really does, and I think it would be very helpful. But like you said, let's see. If you're the Celtics, they need to change up. They need to switch up. Definitely call around the league. See what other stars are not happy in the situation. Next.
Exactly. I got one more thing to say too about that. And this came down while we were recording. Is that Rich Paul always finds a way on this podcast somehow. Rich Paul just mentioned that the Sixers are hurting Ben Simmons. And he said that the Sixers are worsening Simmons' mental health by trying to make him play. And that he's saying that also, and he released this to Shams, that this is no longer about the trade. What do you think about that, Brian?
I think
it's about a little bit more.
Yeah, I think it's about the trade. I don't know.
It seems like it's about the trade. Yep.
What it seems like to me is this is all like mind games right now, and they're trying to like force their hand to trade Ben Simmons, because it's like, all right, now we're making the organization look really bad. They're not taking mental health seriously. They're doing all this stuff. They're trying to pressure him out of the situation. This is messy. This is so messy.
And I'm not gonna be unfair to Rich Paul because there's been other agents in the past that played mind games as well too,
Yeah.
with the media, with how their client is being portrayed, or to make how their client should be portrayed. But I think that the way how Rich Paul has been going about what he does for his clients is going to, at some point, cause for some friction in the next CBA, where they start to have some rules around what an agent can't do. Because I think they're starting to leverage on, like, he purposely chose something that is a touchy situation where you can't really go out there and say, hey, well, Ben Simmons not dealing with that. The team cannot go out there and say that. And then neither can the team push him too hard on it, right? But at the same time, I don't think the team at first, yes, there was a lot of unreasonable things that the Sixers was doing. But this right here, for the Sixers asking for their mental health doctors to come in there and get their assessment of Ben Simmons, and Ben Simmons refusing, is very telling. First, I'm not going to say he's not dealing with what he's dealing with, but it's very telling to show that if there's smoke, there must be some fire to this, and I'm very concerned with the tactics that they're using if this is not truly what Ben Simmons is going through.
Yeah, it's like you said, it's so touchy. At least Rich Paul, from knowing with Nerlens Noel on the Knicks, Nerlens Noel, I believe, is suing Rich Paul because of he refused to tell Nerlens that he was getting contract negotiation or contract offers. Coaches wanted to talk to him, people wanted to talk to Nerlens, and Rich Paul was like, "Oh, no one's out there." And so Rich Paul has a lot of like sneaky little tactics. He has a reputation for this. Like you said, it'll be interesting to see in the next negotiations that they have what can they do about this, because it's kind of getting out of hand at the moment. So next, from the Old Man and the Three podcast, Alex Caruso was recently on there, and Alex Caruso said the Lakers only offered him 2 years, $15 million, and right now, currently, he got 4 years, $37 million. Jeff, do you think the Lakers messed this up?
I am always going to be a big proponent that I never liked the addition of Rob Pelinka as the GM of the Lakers. First, I think conflict of interest. You can't be the manager, or the rep, the agent for one of arguably the greatest Lakers ever, and then become the general manager of the Lakers. Yeah. And the person that I'm speaking of is, rest in peace first, Kobe Bryant, the late great. But since he first got into seat, you knew that the guy is an agent, so he probably first mediated with LeBron to see and sit down, like, where do you want to take this? What do you want to do? Just like any other agent would. He sat with LeBron, and this is all hyperbole. We don't know if this is 100% what happened, but it feels like that's what it is who should be there, who shouldn't be there, and what you think makes sense, right? But then when it comes down to the numbers, that's on Rob, right? So I think this is not the first time. This isn't even the first time where Rob has dropped the bag on players that should still be on the Lakers that had to leave because they were being insulted by what they were being offered. You saw Dwight last year, 2 years ago actually, win a championship and then go And he actually even tweeted that he's coming back to the Lakers.
Yep.
But it leads for you to think he was lowballed on his contract and decided, you know what? I'm going to the Sixers. And then you have Rondo who did a similar path with leaving the Lakers again. He finds his way back on the Lakers just like Dwight. But for them both to have that situation, why would I be shocked that this would happen to Caruso? And I feel bad because like I'm at that in the stage of where Caruso is in his career, he needs to get that money. He's won a championship now. That's going to be with him for the rest of his career and his life. So now get that money, get it where you can. And the Bulls was willing to give it to him. And he's in honestly a better situation for him. I have no problem with him going and do that. And honestly, I'm not a big fan of Rob Pelinka.
Yeah, I think you touched on some really important things of saying, like, with Rob Pelinka, look what he's doing. He's name hunting here. He's trying to get the biggest draws and all this stuff and what he thinks were good players. Meanwhile, Alex Caruso doesn't have a giant name and he isn't this big star. Meanwhile, look what he's doing for the Bulls. He's one of the most impactful players that they had. He was actually very good for the Lakers and actually extremely impactful. But yet, they still decided to get these other guys. Look at, like you mentioned, with Dwight Howard and even JaVale McGee. When you mentioned with Dwight Howard, I think, if I remember correctly, I'm pretty sure Dwight Howard was saying he didn't even get offered a contract because, I mean, look at the contracts he's been signing. Like, they're terribly small. But meanwhile, they're kind of pushing away things that work and then trying to get new guys. So, DeAndre Jordan signed with the Lakers. Why? We all know, we can see from the past couple years, DeAndre Jordan is not really that good of a player. But you hear his name. Whoa, this guy was one of the best centers in 2012 or whatever it was. Like, this is all the guys he was trying to pull. Meanwhile, you had some really good talent, and they're just kind of like Rob Pelinka fumbling the bag. We'll see how the Lakers actually, what they end up looking like at the end of the season. But Alex Caruso, good for him. Like you mentioned, his role right now is exactly what it needs to be, and he's dominating in it. And good for him.
Happy for him. Yep.
And the last piece of news I wanted to touch on, one of the best teams in the NBA right now. Surprise! Before the league actually started, we'd probably say they were one of the 3 worst teams in the NBA. And I'm talking about the Cavs. Cleveland Cavaliers. And recently, the news that we're talking about is they lost one of their top players, their top scorer actually, in Collin Sexton. He has a torn meniscus, and looking up online, torn meniscus seems to recover within 6 to 8 weeks. So, one of the hottest teams in the NBA right now, losing one of their best players. Jeff, how do you think this impacts them?
I honestly, it's funny. I don't think that it changes anything for them as of right now. And, there's Collin Sexton haters out there that will kind of agree with why I say this, but I don't think I'm not saying this to demean Collin Sexton, but I think that some of what he brings to the game, yes, he's a great scorer, right? But what he brings to the game is like he stops the ball a lot for this team. And I think Garland could fit right into that point guard role while he's not around for right now and help facilitate the offense. Evan Mobley still look good. Laurie still look good. Jared Allen, the Eastern Conference Player of the Week, looks good. I think that they're going to continue to look good until Collin Sexton comes back. And I think this goes back to a couple weeks ago. We saw how there was reports of so to speak, they were unwilling to give an extension to Collin Sexton, and rumblings about OKC and all of that, right, started happening. I think that's why they feel this way, is because they feel that if he does leave, he still have the basis with the right pieces to look good and continue to play well without Collin Sexton being there.
I agree. I think this is one of the biggest times for them right now to see. This is like the trial run. How do you look like without Collin Sexton? How can you guys survive and still thrive? Meanwhile, all right, maybe when you trade him, you get someone of equal value back that can help the team in a different way. And so far, like you mentioned, Evan Mobley's looking amazing right now. He's definitely the leader for Rookie of the Year. One of their surprising players that's actually been one of their best players, and Ricky Rubio right now. This man has been coming off the bench, and I think could fit very nicely and do exactly what Collin Sexton does, but better in a sense. Not necessarily the scoring, but like you said, Collin Sexton's ball stopper. Ricky Rubio is the complete opposite of that. And so far, I think it's not going to be too much of a hurt for them. And we'll look forward to how they look in the future.
Ricky Rubio had 37 last week too, so
I cried. It was so sad, man. This man was unstoppable. He was making every three, every contested three, and it was just he looked so good. And so that is what I had for the weekly roundup, I'll call it. So for the listeners, we also not so long ago recorded our team spotlight, which is going to be the Miami Heat. And this is going to be put after this conversation. This is how we're probably going to be doing it from now on. We're going to add the team spotlight with our guest that we have that's going to speak about the team, our resident expert. I think we did a really good job on this episode, and I'm sure the listeners are going to enjoy it a lot.
No, I did.
Oh, yeah, for sure. So, going to wrap this up here. You could listen to this. It's going to be right after this conversation. And make sure, follow us on Twitter. I mention it every week, but every week he surprises me more. Jeff does an amazing job on Twitter. I'm sure if you guys follow and check it out, you'll love what you see. Make sure to, follow us on YouTube. You can find us everywhere that you listen to your podcast. Make sure to leave a review for us. And we'll see you guys next time. Hope you guys enjoy this team spotlight of the Miami Heat.
Peace. All right. For this week's team spotlight is the Miami Heat. And we're here with our resident Miami Heat expert over here, Giancarlo Paone. And obviously we got Brian as well. A few overviews I wanted to go over. Currently standing with where Miami is right now. They're 7-4. They're fifth in the East right now. I'm coining that the East will now be called the Beast East. So they're fifth in the Beast East, and they're second in the Southeast division behind the Wizards, who are a big surprise right now. For scoring, they're ranked eighth, around 110.7 points per game, and they're allowing a 1.3.2. Having them ranked at sixth for defense. All right. With that down, Giancarlo, please speak to us about the Miami Heat.
Just open to say anything about the Heat, whatever's on my mind.
There we go. Yeah. Everything that's on your mind.
With quite recently with the past two losses, when the Heat are playing good, I think they're the best team in the league. But when they're playing bad, they can lose to almost anybody. They've been very inconsistent this year. But from what I see, like from the games that they've actually played a decent game as a team, their upside is very high.
I like it. Yeah. Jeff, you go, please.
Yeah. I agree. And this is where the last podcast, I was saying that I might have to revisit my predictions, and like we said from the beginning, is that I'm gonna remain unbiased on this podcast. And as of right now, I got to revise my predictions as currently where it looks like Miami are the team to be in the East right now, and they have shown on both sides of the ball that they can play with anyone. And like you said, sometimes it's just a couple miscues. That is the reason why they're losing a few of these games. The ugliest game I think I saw from them is the Nuggets game, but they've been in every game. They've been in every fight for every game.
Yeah, the Miami Heat are definitely, I've always known coming into the season, and they're going to be one of the better teams. They're going to be at least top 5 in the East. And even last season, when they've had some of their struggles, they were still like really close. I think a lot of people forget, like, last season in the East, from I say the 4th seed to like the 7th seed, were all between like 1 or 2 games. So Miami Heat could have faced anyone else and probably made it to the second round. But like you, John Collar, you're saying that the last couple games, they've slumped a little bit. Their first, 7 games, they went 6-1. Super impressive. Like Jeff was saying, looked like one of the best teams to go against in the East. And then their last 5 games, they're 2-3. Some heartbreaking losses. I mean, the team that they've actually faced have been extremely good. Like you say, like the Denver Nuggets, the Lakers, which, you can go up and down with, Boston, Utah, Dallas, the impressive wins over Utah and Dallas. So what do you think is causing this little regression from that extremely hot start that they've had?
I mean, it seems a lot of times it's not even their defense. I think it's their offense. They seem a little stagnant at points. The ball just stops moving for some reason, and the amount of assists goes way down. Like at the end of that Lakers game, they had the game in the bag, and then all of a sudden their offense is so stagnant. There's no ball movement. Nobody's moving to set picks and whatnot. So I think it's maybe a lack of maturity for the team, since there's a lot of new players on the team. Possibly, it seems like at like certain moments they just couldn't glue for some reason, and that's really all I could say about that.
Yes. So you brought up new additions. I want to pick your brain. What do you think of the new additions of Kyle Lowry, one of the biggest offseason additions just in the NBA in general, and then adding someone who was just a champion last year in PJ Tucker? How do you think these guys are affecting the team this early on?
Well, I used to be a big Kyle Lowry hater. Because quite honestly, he's not like an offensive first guy, and from afar, he doesn't seem like he's that impactful. But once you see what he actually does in the game and the kind of movement he creates on the court that creates openings for other players, that's like really where his value is. And I love also how they're pushing the ball very fast paced this year up the court. I mean, the amount of like full court passes he's made so far that has really like exploded their fast breaks. I've been loving. And now he's finally starting to get like his 3-point shot on. And once he solidifies that, like they're gonna be incredible. So I'm loving what I'm seeing out of him so far. As far as PJ Tucker too, I never thought anything much of the guy as well. I knew he had a great corner 3, and his defense was pretty solid. But now actually seeing him on the Miami Heat, which I think is the perfect team for him, just based off of mentality, right? The defensive, aggressive mentality. I'm really impressed with this game as well. It's just all about having the players come together and get the chemistry,
Well, I'll add to that as well. Is like, we've had discussions in the past about this. You have the best coach, arguably, in the NBA on this team, and then you're looking at the net rating for what they're doing. Just let's look on the defensive side first. The defensive side, there's a handful of stats where they're in the top 5, right? So even if they're not playing to optimal settings as where they want to be on the offense, that's going to take some time. Guys are gelling and they're getting their footing. But you brought up Kyle Lowry, and the reason why I say the Kyle Lowry addition is not going to be fully realized until the playoff, because much as you were saying, yes, he's increasing the pace of the game right now, but when the game slows down, that's kind of when Kyle Lowry is at his best. And the game in the playoffs is going to be in a half court game. And I think they needed someone like that to command offense, and he's going to be able to find guys like Duncan, Tyler, and even Jimmy Butler, having them both serve as facilitators in the postseason. They could be really deadly. Having Kyle and Jimmy Butler just trading time where they're the primary facilitator, and like I said, as of right now, in my mind, they look like they're the team to beat in the East.
For sure. Another player that has pretty much just blown up this year. He was good in the past. Last season, a little bit of a slump. But Tyler Hero this season has looked insane. Probably one of the top 3 guys. Maybe you got Miles Bridges in there, and some people might say John Morant for most improved. Maybe he's running in there for a 6th man of the year as well. What do you think Tyler Hero, year 3 Tyler Hero, brings to this team?
I've been calling it for about 6 months. Nobody believed me. Everybody doubted me. I said Tyler Hero is going to have his breakout year. I saw all the pieces there. He had to come together a little bit. His handles were a little off. He was a little erratic with the ball, and that's just because he was immature, right? He's only 21 years old at this point. So I knew that all he needed was a little bit of time, and his game would come together. And I've been calling him. I said he was going to be a 6th man a year, but not only 6th man of the year, I think maybe most improved player. He's playing that good. I mean, he had a 30-point night last night. He's had 4 30-point nights off the bench already. I mean, that's ridiculous. I think there was a stat. I forgot who said this, but he's averaging the most off the bench in NBA history, or he got the most amount of points in the first 5 games in NBA history. So, I mean, you can't deny 6th man of the year clearly right now. And I'm loving what he's doing. He's not only shooting the threes now, he's able to actually be a playmaker a little bit. He's still improving that part of his game, but he's able to hit the mid-range and drive a lot more, which I'm loving. And that's all I got to say about him.
Yeah, and I want to add to that as well. So don't let him coming off the bench fool you to think that he's not playing. The guy is playing upwards, same minutes as Jimmy Butler and Kyle Lowry. The one thing that I have caution about with Tyler Hero is, what is that late game decision making going to look like for him long term? Obviously, he's still young. He's going to figure that out at some point, how to play his best when the games start getting tight and towards the end. But it's on Twitter. I know there's always going to be haters, right? So I have been seeing some Tyler Hero hate, in the sense of saying, well, people that he's playing against are the second unit. I don't think that that's something that's fair to him first. Second, if you're looking at some of his splits, he's insane. He has the best 3-point percentage on the team right now, shooting around 43% right now, and then he's shooting around 46% from the field. And then he's taking the most shots actually on the team as well. So we got to see what that means, because even though he's taking the most shots, Jimmy Butler obviously is coming up second on that list, but Jimmy Butler's a little bit more efficient with the shot he's taking, because he's shooting around 52%. But still, I think that this is an upside for him. And, you know, it's extension time for my guy. He's trying to get the bag, man. Like, it's time for him to show.
Is this his last year for like his rookie contract?
No, it's not. But I believe this is the first year he'll be eligible for an extension. So,
Correct. Yeah.
we'll see. We'll see if he gets that money, you know?
I mean, of course, I think so.
Yeah, he's been incredible this season. He's helping me a lot in my fantasy leagues. I also believe in him a lot. Something I actually wanted to go into. It's probably one of the most talked about things in the league right now. A couple games ago when they played the Denver Nuggets, you had to play or Markieff Morris got a little physical, pushed Jokic. Jokic retaliated, pushed him back. Now, do you think, or I want to get your take on this situation, and do you think that 1-game suspension that Jokic got, is that fair?
Yeah, I think it's fair. I really don't have a big opinion on that, honestly. I think it's fair. I think, that was definitely a hard push. That was the hardest push I've seen in a while. So it was on the borderline of something much bigger than that. But I think it still stayed within reason that I think a one game off is probably the right way to go.
Do you think Jokic's retaliation, was that warranted in your opinion?
I think so. I think I heard Shaq saying something like a big man's got to defend himself against like a small guy. You can't be like trying to be taken advantage of by a small guy, because then that's just going to play into the game and maybe, have some sort of psychology on that smaller man, out rebounding him or whatever it may be. So him like keeping his position on that and showing who the bigger man is, I think is the important part.
That the next Met time they play is going to be very interesting. We already have, I see on Instagram, like the Jokic brothers already bought their ticket for the next game, and and then the Morris brothers are like, "Oh, we're ready," and all this stuff. And there's
game. Mark my word.
It's not too far removed too. It's the 29th. So we should see how this goes. But I do want to add something to that as well, is like you were mentioning that you saw what Shaq said. I was watching it inside the NBA as well when they were having that discussion about that. And Charles Barkley said something that stuck with me, is that, Morris took the shot at the biggest guy on the court, the big man on campus, I don't know if you guys watched The Sopranos, but there's a scene where Tony is basically being questioned and like who he is as a person anymore at that point, right? And he took the shot at the biggest guy in the room. That's what that felt like when Morris did that, because if you really look at it, it was about 2 minutes left in the game. It was already a blowout. There was no need to make that foul. And we saw in the past couple of weeks, discussions are already talking about taking that play out of the game with the take foul, where, there's obviously no reason to make that foul. But, I think the best way to handle that was also to give Morris a suspension as well. I agree. Morris did not go to the level that Jokic did, but he provoked the situation. And Jokic, as the leader of his team, allow himself to get punked like that on the court and not do anything about it would not look right as the reigning MVP as well.
He didn't get a suspension?
No, he didn't. He only got fined $50K. And also, Jimmy Butler got fined $25K.
Yeah. I mean, aren't those kind of things always happening on the court? I feel like that's not an exception. I mean, like, there's a good amount of plays every single game that could be like borderline, intentional like that.
Yeah, and that goes back to what I was saying is like the NBA is looking into taking out that play because there's no reason for them to make that foul at that point. The way how he went into the guy's ribs. There's if he wanted to just draw a foul, could have just touched him. He really could have just touched him. But the way how he intended to foul him, it looked like there was intent that he wanted to make it be known that I see you and I'm going to let you know that I'm seen as well.
It's such a gray area though for refereeing, that's why it's so hard to like implement rules on that.
Agree.
Yeah, it was definitely too hard of a foul. It was like a statement kind of thing. Like it's interesting to see. I'm excited to see what happens next in this next game. But for the last thing I wanted to get your thoughts on for the Miami Heat. So I want to get it on record. Where do you project the Miami Heat finish this season, and how far do you think they make it in the playoffs? If you think they make the playoffs, but I'm already assuming.
They're going to make the playoffs. They're going to come together eventually and they're going to be more consistent. But I think the X factor in terms of if they have a good year versus a championship year is going to be Victor Oladipo. I want to see like how healthy he is and how much of an impact he makes. But nobody's thinking about Victor Oladipo. He's an all-star that hasn't even played yet. And that hasn't shown his full potential in a few years. And he says, I saw in a recent interview that he says, he's feeling the best he has since he got his very first, injury a couple years ago. So I'm excited to see that. I think, nevertheless, though, my prediction was that they'll become, the second best team in the East. I'm realistic about things. I still think that the Bucks are probably going to be number one, even though they've lost, a decent amount of games right off the bat. I think they'll come together. And my top four: Bucks, Heat, Brooklyn, Bulls. That's what I'm thinking.
I like it. I respect it. All right, and then how far do you think they make it in the playoffs?
Championship game. I do. Because I don't think they're going to let I think it's, the biggest competitor is going to be the Bucks. We'll see about, the Nets. I still, they've got their act together a little bit and they're starting to win. But I still don't see it. I still don't see the Nets to where they should be yet. I've seen it in the Bucks, even though they're continuing to, lose some games. But I like their chances for a championship game. I definitely think it's within reach. And I don't think they're going to let the Bucks beat them again in the playoffs after getting shut out, 4-0 the previous year. I just don't think Jimmy's going to allow that. I think that's a big reason why he's come out so aggressive this year. Jimmy can score on demand. He can get his shot practically on every single play. He just chooses not to a lot of the time because he's a team player and he wants to pass it off and be a playmaker. But you've definitely seen Jimmy try to find a shot a lot more this year, and that's I think why they've been very successful.
Let me ask you a question then. So let's say hypothetically we switch it up the standings a little bit, and you put the Nets at 1, and then you have the Bucks at 3. So, what do you think second round meeting would look like? Do you want to avoid them at all costs until Eastern Conference Finals, or you think that any place that they're placed in, they're beating them?
The Miami against the Bucks.
Yes.
I think at any place they're going to beat them because I think they're a stronger team this year. Right on par, if not better than the Bucks. And, the mentality, they're not going to let them beat them after, embarrassing 4-0 in the playoffs last year. Yeah,
I think I love what you brought up, Victor Oladipo. I actually even forgot about him myself. I remember doing some research on the Miami Heat before, or like a couple weeks ago, and the same exact situation of like, oh my God, Victor Oladipo's on this team. that's insane. And then I completely forgot about it right now. Like we haven't seen him in so long, but if he comes out and he plays like he used to, ooh, that this team just becomes that much more dangerous. I think clearly they right now I'd say they're close to being in that in that level of Miami or not Miami of Brooklyn and the Bucks. But if Oladipo really is playing like he used to, I think those three are just like
Don't be fooled by Brooklyn and the Bucks. They're 1 to 3 guys. Yes, they're better, but they're 1 to 8, a full team. We're talking about a championship team. We're not just talking about the 2 best players, except maybe if you're, with LeBron in his heyday. But 1 through 8 is what matters. 1 through 8, the Heat have the best team in the league, I think.
I would argue that because I think, first, I do think that depth is an overrated, that people do bring up. When depth usually comes to mind is injury in my mind. But I agree with the thought process that, if Victor comes back, that's an X factor you have coming potentially if he's coming off the bench, if he's starting. He's going to give you that jump, right? But I think the Nets, where they are and what the Bucks situation, why they look like what they look like right now is, first, I'll start with the Bucks. The Bucks are missing a lot of people right now. And when you take out your second player and he has COVID and he's out for X amount of days, then Brook Lopez is dealing with his issues. There's a lot of pieces that make that cog go that are not there right now. And reflecting on that, it makes it look a little worse than what they truly are. I know last night they got the win against the Knicks, but they did not look good for the majority of that game. And Giannis only had 15 points. Granted, he had 15, and I believe 8. But he did not look amazing because he just did not have the right cast around him at that time. Then now for the Nets, I think the Nets, something about the Nets that's different about this year than last year is they are taking an increasing step to increase their defense from what it was last year. That's we're ranking around 22nd in defensive rating last year, and right now they're currently up in the top 10. And it's the blessing and the curse of not having Kyrie around is that everyone now has to give it a little bit more. And individuals that we did not think were going to step up to the level of where they needed to step up to are stepping up. LaMarcus Aldridge looks like a walking bucket every time he's on the court now. Look at Joe Harris.
Tell me about Blake Griffin.
Blake Griffin is still has those woes right now currently. But still, I think that if you go from 1 through 8 as well, the Nets do have a good balance of defensive-minded players, but also that offense as well. And then let's be honest, James Harden's not going to just look like what he looked like in those first couple games for the whole season. So I think it is those 3 teams. Wherever those 3 teams land, it could be Nets 1, 2, Nets 1, 2, and 3, Bucks 1, 2, and 3, Heat 1, 2, or 3. That's how I see it at this point right now.
Yeah, I kind of lean more towards Jeff's camp here with the depth is overrated, mainly because we see in the playoffs how many times is Kevin Durant playing the entire game? How many times does Giannis play the entire game? So generally in the playoffs, when you really need to get this win, those bench players aren't really playing more than 5-10 minutes. And so that's where it could be a little bit overrated, but those guys are still extremely important. Miami Heat, even without their bench, their starting 5 is still extremely impressive. And so far, Jimmy Butler is one of the top players in the league so far. Let's pray he can stay healthy because injuries has been one of his biggest problems these past couple seasons. But the Miami Heat, they are a force to deal with right now.
I agree. They're here to play.
Yeah.
Competitor West.
Can you say that again?
Their biggest competitor in the West.
Ooh, there's see, this is where in the West there's so much that you got right now. Golden State, they're insane.
I think Golden State the clear first, front runner. The problem is the second team. Who is the second team right behind Golden State?
I will say I had to revise that a little bit as well. Is I honestly think that the Jazz have solidified themselves as a team that should be in the conversation, and maybe they won't. Defensively, I think that would be a great finals for those two teams. But who I would give on the edge on the offense, I really don't know, because they honestly have similar games in how they play. They have that one dominant guy in Jimmy Butler and also Mitchell, but they have those defensive anchors and having a Bam and having Gobert. There's just too much like similarities with those two teams that shows that would be a great final first, but I can't choose someone that would win that if that happened.
Yeah, I'd say it's so tough. My number one, Golden State. I'd actually even say my number two is the Denver Nuggets. It's just Jokic is so good, and if somehow, or I don't know the injury status of Jamal Murray, but when he comes back, if he's back for the playoffs, man, they're going to be so dangerous. I 3 and 4 are the toughest for me because, like Jeff mentioned, Utah's right there. You can never count them out. But at the same time, Phoenix, who just made it last year, they're also looking amazing. Right now, I don't know the exact number off the top of my head, but they're on like a 6-game win streak or something like that. And they are looking extremely impressive.
It's 6 games.
I don't think Murray's coming back. I think there's a small chance he's coming back in time, and if he does, I don't know if it's going to be enough time for him to like fully get his game back. But I think with a healthy Murray, I think the Nuggets are the team to be in the NBA. I think they might be the best team in the NBA with a healthy Murray. So I'm liking their chances for next year. But as far as the Phoenix Suns, honestly, I think they've had a bit of a fluke year last year, and I think although they're a good team, they're a playoff team, the entire NBA has got better, the West included. So, although they may still be a good team, there's a few teams that have surpassed them, and they're probably going to be probably a 5th seed, to be honest, this year.
Yeah, it's interesting. Yeah, so at least my thing on the take of everyone else has gotten better, of like all their players, their main guys were also extremely young. So in the offseason, they're not doing nothing. They're working on their game, and so far Devin Booker is looking better than the Devin Booker of last year, and all their other guys, and what is it, Cam Johnson? I think he's also looking even better this year. Like, I don't think they needed to improve on too much because they kind of already had other guys. Just those guys were too young, in my opinion. So now with the extra year in the belt and having that championship run and all that, I think that's going to be pretty huge for them, that experience.
I agree. I think they're definitely better, but it's going to be close.
Yeah. Are they good enough?
Golden State, Utah. I do think the Lakers pull it together. They have to pull it together with that kind of star power. The Nuggets, those are 4 clear, probably better teams. So, I mean, they're still right there. They're very close, but I'm thinking 5th.
Well, we got the receipts. We're, for sure we're gonna have you back on, and so we can come back to this conversation. When more time has passed, and we'll see where these teams land. What was that?
We'll place a bet on it.
All right, yeah. You want $5 bet? $5. All right, so what's the bet? So you're saying number 5, and
I say number 5. And if both of us don't get it right, then Jeff buys us a drink.
There you go.
That's a terrible bet.
All right, Jeff. This is a deal.
I do not sanction this bet.
We'll talk about the details more offline, but I think that's a good spot to cut off our team spotlight. Giancarlo, really thank you for having. Really appreciate having you on right now. This is a lot of fun. Your insight has been extremely helpful, and I look forward to talking about the Miami Heat again.
Looking forward to it. You'll see Tyler Herro, 6th man of the year, most improved player. Jimmy Butler, first team All NBA. He won't win the MVP. Kevin Durant's going to win it. First team All NBA. I think he does it this year. And Miami Heat, definitely the championship game. You'll see.
These are very bold predictions, but honestly, I don't necessarily disagree. Like, I don't think they're actually that far fetched. I think this is very high possibility for these.
I had to put my word out there just so people are speaking the truth.
There you go. Well, thanks again. Really appreciate it, and we'll talk to you again.